apologetics, and current events. From the housetops, coming up next.
Dr. Paul Lavin, a traditional Catholic psychologist, summarizes in vivid detail the challenges young Catholics must face today. In his book, Keeping the Faith, A Young Catholic's Guide to Coping with a Secular World, Dr. Lavin identifies the enemy, Satan, and his increasing influence in the world. Dr. Lavin now supplies some interesting insights into pride. Pride is the most malicious of the capital sins. Pride and arrogance go hand in hand with each other. The proud person places himself above all men, and God as well. Like Lucifer, he proclaims loudly and boldly, "I will not serve." Today more than ever, pride has become a dominant and malignant force that is tearing away the fabric of our society. Our arrogant and secular world no longer gives Christ the King even the rudiments of the recognition to which he is entitled. Christ is excluded from our public schools. He has been taken out of our classrooms. He is ignored in our courts of law. And he and our Blessed Mother are insulted and blasphemed by comedians, movie producers, sports commentators. Note how football commentators refer to a long pass as a Hail Mary or a spectacular catch as the Immaculate Reception. It has become fashionable to make fun of the priests who serve him and to mock the sisters who were the stalwarts of Catholic education before our parochial schools were dismantled. Lay teachers have now been hired to replace those dedicated nuns to whom the past generation of Catholics owe so much. Make no mistake about it, pride can be a subtle sin that slowly and persistently eats away at the purity of our soul. Pride hides itself within a coat of false respect. On the face of things, self-respect is a good thing. God intended that man should respect and love himself. However, he did not intend that we should place ourselves above him or our fellow men, no matter what our station in life happens to be. In today's "it's all about me" environment, we are constantly counseled to have self-esteem. No one stops to analyze the concept behind this self-glorification. Self-esteem can become loving yourself to the point of worship. It should not be confused with self-respect, which in its true sense gives dignity to a person. This self-centeredness is manifested in a number of ways. Decorating the body with multiple or elaborate tattoos that creep into view from the confines of clothing reveal a worship and consuming attention given to the flesh, the soul's visible counterpart. This visible fixation on oneself consumes the energy that was once spent on religion and humanitarian acts. These ornaments adorn the new idol that replaces God, namely self. Sports reveal another avenue of pride and disdain. For example, it is not unusual for an athlete who successfully defeats an opponent to engage in taunting, finger-pointing, silly dancing, and other cheap antics. This so-called celebrating is no more than a blatant insult aimed at his competitor. Trash talk, the use of foul and insulting language directed to an opponent, and grossly outlandish behavior have become an ordinary part of sporting events, to which the public has become largely anesthetized. Brazen antics and horrific speech don't even cause the average American to wince any longer. Just like so many other things that have become foul around us, these have simply become an accepted way of life. Like the citizens of Rome, we have failed to see how wicked we have allowed ourselves to become. Head-banging, fist-pumping, facial distortions followed with a defiant yes, silly end-zone dancing following a touchdown, and disgusting body gyrations have become such a part of mainstream America that the general public has become blinded on how low our behavioral standards have sunk. There are many people who will justify the preceding absurdities by stating it's just part of the game. Do these antics add or detract from the sportsmanship that is the foundation upon which sports are supposed to be built? But the most important question that we have to ask ourselves is, how does God view this behavior? How does he view having his mother blasphemed? As practicing Catholics, it is imperative that we not only address but provide straightforward answers to these questions. Will your flesh cringe the next time that a football commentator refers to a long pass as a Hail Mary? Or will you, like most mainstream Americans, blow it off, claiming that such an insult to Our Blessed Lady is no big deal? Unfortunately, pride extends far beyond our athletic fields today. It has infested our academic institutions, business circles, and the political arena as well. Our Lord warned us about those learned persons who become puffed up with their own self-importance, believing that they are more intelligent than their fellow men, and even smarter than God Himself. Because some persons acquire a wealth of worldly knowledge and are quick-witted, it is easy for them to become intellectually arrogant. Laborers, policemen, firemen, restaurant employees, and those who work in the trades are looked down on and are considered by them to belong to the lower social class. Society could not function without these people who perform essential mundane tasks on a daily basis. In today's society, attending a college or university and acquiring advanced degrees has been deemed a necessity. These degrees certainly can help one to attain occupational opportunities and better pay in the future. While the pursuit of these should not be discouraged, it is doubtful that God intended that we should all be employed in an office setting. Rather, God has distributed various talents throughout the human race. If these are developed and utilized accordingly, all facets of the social order will prosper and thrive. Status or social pressure should not be the reason for going to college. Imagine a world that is populated with only office workers, thinkers, and planners. In such a world, there would be no farm workers to cultivate the land and grow needed foods. There would be no truck drivers to deliver this food to the grocery stores. And even if some food was available, there would be no one to distribute and pack it. There would be no transportation workers to drive buses or trains. Thus, you can see that the whole social order would not only crumble, but it would be unable to function. God has a place for each of us, no matter how important or unimportant this may seem. Doing our job with excellence is a critical part that determines how well we function as a society each and every day of our lives. Keep in mind that God rewards those who follow His will. He is unlikely to offer paradise to persons simply because one happens to be more intelligent than another. Rather than puff ourselves up in a quest to be better than others, it makes more sense to effectively use the talents that God has given us. From those who have been given great intellectual potential, God will require much. For those who are less fortunate, less will be required. The important point to keep in mind is that God has given us talents so that we can be of service to Him and His people. In the final analysis, the use of these talents will determine how we will be judged. There is much more to be said about pride and how this has negatively impacted corporate America. Corporate leaders, who should serve as inspirational role models to their workers, have been guilty of deceiving the workers over the past 40 years. Leading business executives have been caught in what is called cooking the books. In plain English, this means falsifying the company's financial records so that the business appears to be doing better than the real facts indicate. This kind of deception allowed many of these executives to live lavishly, while the workers not only lost their jobs, but were ruined financially as well. Their greed and arrogance, which was fueled by their belief that they could successfully cheat their consumers and the general public, are still negatively impacting our society, and particularly those unfortunate persons who participated in this fraud. There are some men and women who become so satisfied with their own self-importance that they truly believe that they are above the laws of God and our courts. The expensive clothes, multi-million-dollar homes, luxury-laden automobiles, and piles of cash may help to protect them in this world, but these are unlikely to buy them a ticket into paradise. Again, how do you think God will judge their actions when they appear before Him? Will He agree with the excuses that, well, everybody else does it, or that this is what you have to do in order to get ahead? Think about the preceding carefully. It is quite possible that a well-paying job in a corporation might someday be offered to you. You might be asked to cook the books or to make alterations which misrepresent the truth. You might even be assured by your boss or other executive in the chain of command that this is the way that business is done, and that which you are being asked to do is only a small indiscretion, nothing to worry about. Again, think about this now, before you find yourself caught in a web that will plague your conscience and could ruin your reputation as well. Lastly, let's examine pride in politics and the effect that this vice has on the lives of so many people. Persons who are elected to positions of public service not only have a great responsibility to those who elect them, but to Almighty God. For it is God who allows them to be placed in positions of great influence and power. Think about this key point, which Christ made clear to Pilate. Pilate's power came from above because it was God who allowed this to be so. Recall the Passion, when Christ was brought to the Praetorium. Pilate, after arguing unsuccessfully with the Jews, returned to the Praetorium and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to crucify you, and I have power to release you?" Following these questions, Christ stated the following: "You would have no power at all over me were it not given you from above." John 19, 9-11. As you can see, Christ clearly pointed out to Pilate that his political authority was given to him by God, not the Jews, not the Gentiles, not the Roman army, and not the legislature and citizens of Rome. And ultimately, it would be this higher authority to whom Pilate would have to account. In reading this portion of the Passion, one cannot help but noticing that Pilate did not want to condemn Jesus, and that he was very anxious about being placed in the position of having to do so. He appeared to be fearful of Jesus, probably because he recognized that Christ was more than just an ordinary man, especially when Christ revealed that his kingdom was not of this world, but that he was a king.
We'll be back with more from the Housetops after this break.
This is Deacon Bob Connor of First Concern Pregnancy Resource Center, Clinton and Marlboro, and you are listening to WQPH 89.3 FM, Shirley, Fitchburg.
On the WQPH community calendar.
Well, Connie, what is happening this week?
Well, on Sunday, the big day, and I hope that you won't forget to buy Dad a present. Now, it does not have to be from Tiffany's or some expensive place, but at least let your dad know that you appreciate all that he has done for you during your life and his. And if your dad happens to be in heaven,
yeah, let's hope.
Let's remember him with your prayers.
Yes, and if you're, I'm hoping, going to Mass and communion, you could offer your communion up for your father's intentions and ask him to intercede for us with all our family problems that we seem to have, correct?
That's right.
What's your favorite memory of your dad? Was he a good dad?
Unfortunately, I do not have memories because he died when I was 3.5 years old.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm sure a lot of people listening today have that same situation. So you're going to see your father someday, right?
I certainly hope so.
Yes, and he's going to have a present for you. He's going to open the door to heaven, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, happy Father's Day to everybody listening, grandparents, people who have served as fathers. I'm thinking of stepfathers that have stepped up to the plate and taken on the joy of bringing another child into the world and forming them in our beautiful Catholic faith. That's the most important thing I think my father taught me, was he was a daily Catholic communicant. Went to communion, loaded the 6 of us into a station wagon we called Charlie, and off we went to Mass. What a beautiful thing.
And also, we want to remember uncles.
Uncles, yes. Uncles serve as father figures, too. And then most of these children that are having problems today don't seem to have strong father figures in their life. The biggest father of all is our pastor.
That's right.
Right? Happy Father's Day, Father Sullivan.
And all priests.
And all priests. We love you.
You're listening to WQPH 89.3 FM, Shirley, Fitchburg.
On the WQPH 89.3 FM community calendar, St. Bernard's Parish at St. Camillus Church on Mechanic Street in Fitchburg is looking for adorers for their days of adoration. Adoration is currently Monday after the 8:30 a.m. daily Mass till 7 p.m. and Tuesdays after the 8:30 Mass till 4 p.m. They're also looking for adorers on Sundays. That'll be running from after the 8 a.m. Mass till after the 6 p.m. Mass on Sundays. If you have an interest in doing adoration on either of those days or in the Sunday adorations, email us at wqph893@comcast.net. That's wqph893@comcast.net. Subject line, adoration. This has been the WQPH 89.3 FM Community Calendar.
We invite you to say the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who wander through the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen.
You are listening to WQPH 89.3 FM Shirley, Fitchburg. And now a word from author Peter and Jemmy, who is the host of Your Prayer Intentions, taking place every Saturday at 12:30 p.m.
Whether you're donating money or giving us prayers, without you, we don't go on. And if you do want to help us go on, please consider going to WQPHradio.org. There's a donate button there. You can give once, you can give monthly, and it makes a difference. It keeps all of our shows, and we have a great lineup of shows, keeps us going. And whether you're a fan of Your Prayer Intentions, whether you like Steve's show, Benedict's Harris Sundays at midnight, whether you like Brother Matthew and Brother Anthony from the Housetops, which is on Sundays 10:30 a.m. and 4 p.m., whether you're a fan of the Children's Rosary, which we have every day at 5 p.m., 7 days a week, whether you like our Local Matters show, which is Saturday at 11, or Talk Catholic, which comes right after us at 12:30, Larry's Music Loft, Sunday at 11 a.m., we have the Shepherd's Pie Saturdays at 1 p.m. Or Dan and Tom with the 13th Apostle, which comes just before us at 11:30. Any of those shows and all the stuff you donate, you help these things come out. But what also at the WQPH website, in addition to podcasts of our shows, is the prayer wall.
Right on the prayer wall, support WQPH and get WQPH 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on WQPHradio.org.
Unlike Christ, however, Pilate was a politician. The problem that he encountered was that of satisfying the Jews, who could cause political trouble for him in Rome, and at the same time mollifying his conscience for condemning an innocent man who instinctively roused fear within him. And how might we know that Pilate was fearful of condemning Christ, who had no earthly power and was the humblest of all men? We simply have to look at the way Pilate behaved. He tried in various ways to get the Jews to release Christ, even offering to release Christ instead of Barabbas. Pilate knew that to crucify Christ was wrong. However, to placate the Jews, he gave them permission to commit this murderous act. In order to pacify his conscience, on the other hand, he declared that Christ was innocent, and he then washed his hands of this matter. Deep down inside, one gets the sense that Pilate knew that he was dealing with God, but in order to maintain his political state, he passed the buck, preferring to do what was popular rather than that which was right. As the proceeding indicates, public servants are placed in hallowed positions by God. They therefore have a direct responsibility to acknowledge and carry out his laws. However, in this day and age, this issue is swept under the rug. Rather, we simply declare that there is a separation between church and state, and that if God's laws just happen to coincide with state laws, we will enforce them. But what happens when the laws of the state are contrary to the laws of God? For example, laws supporting abortion and same-sex marriage. What should we do then? What would Christ expect of us? Would washing our hands of the matter be acceptable? Or how about proclaiming that religion is a private matter and should be kept to oneself rather than openly discussed in our community forums? How would God expect you to deal with these issues once you enter secular society? More than ever, politicians and their appointees have become increasingly skilled in using clever language in their attempts to circumvent the truth. The term spinning is part of the new language that has been concocted to explain this current phenomenon. For instance, the term misspoke is now used instead of lying. Collateral damage is now used to describe innocent civilians who are killed in a battle, and significant other is used to identify boyfriends and girlfriends who have decided to cohabitate instead of getting married. Yes, we have become quite skilled in twisting the truth to suit our own purposes, and unfortunately, this seems to have a profound cynical effect on the public's view of lawyers and those politicians who have been entrusted to do that which is in the best interest of our nation. By way of conclusion, Dr. Lavin addresses more directly young Catholics. As a young man or woman who is about to enter secular society, you might someday plan to get a law degree or enter the field of politics and public service. Law and public service are high and noble callings, which require intelligence and high moral standards. Should you decide to follow this path, you need to think seriously about where you would stand on issues which affect you as a practicing Catholic. What would God expect of you if you decided to run for public office? How would God expect you to handle the issue regarding the separation of church and state? Would you support gay marriages, even though these are morally wrong? Would you vote against abortion, even though the majority of persons in your district support this position? Think about these issues now. It won't be long before you become a public servant. As a registered voter, you will be asked to vote for a candidate to represent you. Will you vote for politicians who support some good things but are pro-abortion? Will you use your Catholic faith as a guide in casting your ballot? As a public servant, it will be your responsibility to obey the laws of God as well as the laws of the state. There are state laws that contradict God's laws. Will you work to overturn these malicious laws? As a young practicing Catholic, you will have a lot to think about before you enter the secular world around you. Above all, be careful of the devil and his attempts to fill you with excessive self-love and the false belief that God is not necessary in our attempts to build a humane society. Worldly utopias cannot exist unless we have Christ the King to lead us. Unfortunately, we have failed to learn this most important of lessons. You can receive a free copy of Keeping the Faith, A Young Catholic's Guide to Coping with a Secular World by contacting info@saintbenedict.com. That's info@SAINT Benedict, BENEDICT.com. St. Louis Marie Grignon de la Bechelerie, who abandoned his family name for that of his birthplace, was born on January 31, 1673, in the little town of Montfort, which is located in Brittany, France. He studied for the priesthood at Saint-Sulpice in Paris, having made the 200-mile journey there on foot. He was ordained a priest in 1700 at the age of 27. St. Louis de Montfort had wanted to become a missionary in Canada, but he was advised to remain in France. There he traveled around the western part of the country, from diocese to diocese, from parish to parish, instructing the people, preaching, helping the poor, hearing confessions, giving retreats, opening schools, and rebuilding church buildings. His labors were almost miraculously fruitful. He stated that never did a sinner resist after being touched by him with a rosary. But because he encountered great opposition from religious authorities, in particular being forbidden by the Bishop of Poitiers to preach in his diocese, he decided to travel to Rome to ask the Holy Father if he was doing God's will, and whether he should continue as before. St. Louis de Montfort walked to Rome, 1,000 miles, and put his case to Pope Clement XI. The Pope told him to continue his traveling missionary work, and named him Missionary Apostolic, but told him always to be sure to work under obedience to the diocesan authorities. One of St. Louis de Montfort's greatest problems was the opposition he encountered from propagators of the Jansenist heresy, which was then very active in France. The Jansenists spread an atmosphere of harshness and moral rigorism, claiming that human nature was radically corrupted by original sin, as opposed to the Catholic teaching that human nature is essentially good, though fallen, and although it has suffered a darkening of the intellect and weakening of the will. The Jansenists denied that God's mercy is available to all, and they allowed only infrequent reception of the sacraments of penance and the Holy Eucharist, and only after long and severe preparation, with Holy Communion being looked upon as a reward rather than a remedy. Also, they taught that God should always be addressed with fear and trembling. These tenets resembled those of Calvinism. Although Jansenism had been condemned by the Church twice even before St. Louis de Montfort's birth, its teachings continued to spread and to influence people for a century. In contrast, St. Louis de Montfort preached confidence in Mary and union with her divine Son. St. Louis de Montfort founded two religious orders, the Daughters of Wisdom, begun in 1703 from a number of poor and afflicted girls at the Hospital of Poitiers, where he was temporary chaplain, and the Missionaries of the Company of Mary, Montfort Fathers and Brothers, founded in 1715. The Brothers of St. Gabriel, a teaching order, also claim St. Louis de Montfort as their spiritual father. St. Louis de Montfort left several writings, the most famous being The Secret of the Rosary, True Devotion to Mary, and The Secret of Mary. These books were based on sermons he had given when traveling throughout France. By spreading devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, St. Louis de Montfort was teaching souls to love the devil's great enemy. In True Devotion to Mary, he states that the devil fears Mary more than all angels and men, and in some sense more than God himself. At the saint's beatification investigation, many witnesses testified that during his life they had heard struggles between him and the devil, including the sound of fist blows and the swish of whips. St. Louis de Montfort exhausted his great physical strength by his apostolic labors. On his deathbed in Saint-Laurent-sur-Sèvre, at the age of 43, he kissed the crucifix and a statue of the Blessed Mother. Apparently, speaking to the devil, he exclaimed, "In vain do you attack me. I am between Jesus and Mary. I have finished my course. All is over. I shall sin no more." Then he died peacefully on April 28, 1716. His feast day is April 28th, the day of his birth in heaven. St. Louis de Montfort's writings were examined by the Holy See, which pronounced that there was nothing in them to hinder his beatification and canonization. He was canonized a saint in 1947. Well, that concludes our program for this week. We hope you've enjoyed listening to From the Housetops Radio. That which you hear in the ear, preach from the housetops. Until next time, God bless you.
From the Housetops is produced by the Slaves of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, Still River, Massachusetts.